Day 705 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 383,000 military personnel losses, which represents an additional 1,070 in the past day, as we see the AFU reach above that 1,000 mark once again. Then, as for hardware losses, a modest 10 tanks, 25 APVs, 16 artillery, and 46 vehicles of various shapes and sizes. And while we're at it, we'll take a look at the territory of control by each side, expressed as a percentage, but also in square kilometers. So the purple here shows Crimea and parts of the Donbass that Russia held before their February 24th invasion, which sits at roughly 7.3%. Then the brown color is everything occupied after Russia's Feb 24th invasion at roughly 10.7%. Then the red is a combination of these two, sitting at roughly 18%. But then the green is the Ukrainian liberated territory, which Ukraine took back from Russian occupation. And so when you put the total occupied figure and the total liberated figure together, it adds up to a total figure of what Russia used to hold in this war, about 25%. And since Russia is occupying roughly 18% right now instead of 25%, this means they're running at a deficit from their highest levels of ground occupation in this war, which is not completely unlike a guy at the blackjack table trying to chase his losses. Then we'll head back across to the map today as an unidentified flying object attacked another oil refinery in Russia, this time at the Slavnet refinery in Yaroslavl. Now, this might seem very, very far away, so it is northeast of Moscow, but if we pop in the ruler, we will see it is thereabouts 700 kilometers, perhaps 400 miles, which in terms of drone range is not as far as, say, St. Petersburg. Now, the extent of the damage is unclear, but either way, Putin and the Russian MOD are clearly getting the message now that they need to either pull back their air defenses to support key strategic and economic assets within Russia, or keep them on the front. So events like these really put them between a rock and a hard place, because more and more, they'll find that they cannot have their cake and eat it too. In fact, their airspace is just too big to defend inside of Russia. So what a predicament they find themselves in now. Then, also in Russia, and in somewhat of an expected fashion, a polyethylene plant went up in flames in Sverdlovsk in central Russia. Now, this instance is less likely to be directly related to the war in Ukraine, but it is interesting that we more or less expect these types of occurrences within Russia these days. And it was possibly due to an insurance job for the proprietors to escape the failing economics of the business world in the country. Then, still within Russia, so in terms of the big freeze, Russia continues to persist with infrastructure breakdowns amid sub-freezing temperatures, which is indeed an expansion of an existing problem that has plagued Russian cities and towns for years. But the situation has become far more acute now due to the Russian wartime policies, with Russia routinely prioritizing military spending and the corrupt oligarchy with their funding misappropriation. So prioritizing all of that over reinvestment in the general public infrastructure, especially since its invasion of Ukraine. And so many regional governments have been asked to take on the burden of operating with less federal revenue and have been asked to fund local volunteer forces for the military for quite some time now, which has likely stretched their own budgets razor thin and necessitated some cuts to maintenance spending, with additional mobilizations leading to a workforce shortage across all industries, including that of qualified heating engineers and plumbers, which makes for some pretty dicey situations. Then we'll head back into the Ukrainian map today, and we'll start out in the Donbass on the Crimea front as a fairly big mechanized Russian attack was repelled towards Yempalivka. So we'll zoom in right there for that one, so around that location. In fact, just north of here, Russian forces are also attempting to take advantage of the hardened ground conditions over this winter period in an effort to make additional pushes at Avdiivka, although no new gains for the territory or for them today. In fact, probably a loss of land if we go back one day on the map, yeah, there we go, then move across to today. But on top of that, the Russian forces staged at these positions here find that they've come up against Ukrainian forces from higher positions to the west, not to mention the natural obstacle of the river that they would also need to contend with to push any further. And as such, in this general northern direction, we continue to see a bunch of Russian armored vehicle losses. Then moving across to Avdiivka, as we saw a bit more activity at the far edges of the northern flank, which is and also east of the railway, as a Ukrainian T-64 BV main battle tank finished off a Russian BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicle. In this instance, the event has been recorded from a drone and the tank itself. Then just moving a little bit south, in the southern outskirts of Avdiivka, Ukrainian forces counterattacked in an attempt to push back Russian forces, with the results currently unclear, but the grey zone has been slightly enlarged. Oh, and also a Ukrainian-operated Bradley M2 was deep in the thick of it at this location as well. Then just briefly having a bit of a look around, so somewhere in the east, this Russian repair shop for heavy military vehicles has been struck by Ukrainian missiles. As Ukrainian intelligence surely picked up the coordinates of this location, leaving the Russian forces here to pick up the pieces. Then we move all the way across briefly to Kherson in the Krinky region once again, as Russian forces that were attempting to encroach upon Ukrainian bridgehead positions stationed here were targeted by a few drop drone munitions. It's almost as if they don't even expect it at this point. But hey, given the lack of communication within the Russian military, there's a chance that they've got no idea at all what they're about to walk into. Then moving across to some news for today, so Greece has approved the transfer of Soviet-era air defense systems to Ukraine. The details of the military package have not been disclosed yet, but it is known that the country is armed with a lot of air defense systems such as the Tor, the OSA, the S-300s, and even the Zu-23-2 air defense systems, as well as their respective munitions. Now, for a bit of added context here, earlier in the war, Greece was not keen to provide Ukraine with that much, due to their tensions with Turkey in the region. But since Greece and Turkey have really since seen the fallout effects imposed upon an invading country onto another sovereign nation, seem to in fact cause these two nations to recently make an in-depth friendship treaty focused on pursuing good neighborly relations, which therefore possibly freed up Greece's concerns about Soviet stockpiles, allowing them to send them off to Ukraine. And it must be said, not to mention, Greece, or the old city-state of Athens, is widely considered to be the birthplace of democracy. So in any case at all, I'm very quite sure that a very protective cohort of nations would come to the aid of Greece if any other nation ever decided to actively perform military operations against any of these Greeks. Then in some other news, Ukraine's intelligence agency said its cyber experts attacked and wiped out the IT network of IPL Consulting, a Russian industrial IT firm, on January 27th. And as a result of that, the Ukrainian-linked cyber group reportedly destroyed over 60 terabytes of data encompassing many servers and databases. Putin gonna be mad. Then moving on, as in a sign of the slowly shifting times for Russia, recently crowds have been gathering at campaign sites of Kremlin critic and Russian presidential candidate hopeful Boris Nadezhdin. So across many cities, bringing unpredictability to the upcoming Russian March election, which of course is often seen as a mere show to extend Putin's long tenure. Now, Nadezhdin, a 60-year-old experienced politician, aims to correct Putin's actions in Ukraine and stop the draft, release political detainees, and overturn a myriad of laws against civil rights. As such, to run in the election, he needs 100,000 signatures from over 40 regions within Russia by January's end, which is exactly what you're seeing here with the lining up. And Nadezhdin credits his campaign's progress to surprising support, including endorsements from the Civil Initiative Party, financial donations, volunteer sign-ups, and backing from influential Russian figures, some of which are in exile. So analysts see his popularity as a reflection of public dissatisfaction with the Kremlin and its actions in Ukraine. So, will this guy be the next Russian president elected in March? Absolutely not. But do events like these show the slowly changing sentiment within Russian society? I'd certainly like to think so. I mean, even this 82-year-old Russian babushka recently interviewed on the streets of Moscow had some suggestions or ideas on where Putin should go. Then moving on to a bit of a quick funny for today, so in a bit of a slight change of pace for funnies, because I've wanted to show you this footage for at least a few weeks now, as we came across the footage of Russia's latest and greatest tank, the T-90M variant, the really latest and greatest, captured in battle by the AFU, where they later performed a bit of an unboxing video on it, where piece by piece they go through the tank's features, explaining the 125mm cannon. Then they take a look at the armor, which they state should be able to live up to its advertisements and withstand anti-tank fire like the Javelin missiles, but does not. As such, they make a joke about it having no analogues to the West. They also then show the penetration of a anti-tank missile or RPG coming through the armor onto the inside of the tank. That again certainly doesn't help it live up to its name of the best tank in the world, at least as Putin would say. They also mention that the communication systems and control systems, as found on this very tank, are very much lagging behind in the Russian defense industry. Just older tech. Then of course it was also mentioned the gaping flaw of the design of this tank, with direct hits on the tank that cause ammunition within the turret that makes it explode, fly off into the air, as we all know. Also, the tank's gun itself evidently wasn't modernized in the last 22 years. And bear in mind, this is a tank that was with a build date of 2022, but the tank gun itself, 1992, as they showed us there. And there was also a lot of older fit-outs, as they have seen before and expected on the older T-72s and T-80s, but not the T-90s, especially not the M variants. So in summary, how did this tank end up comparing to NATO tanks? The likes of the Leopard 2 A6s, the Challenger 2s, or the M1 Abrams? It simply doesn't compete. As a result, the best tank Russia has to offer in this war, and any war, turns out to be mostly derivative garbage from older Soviet models. And in fact, at one point, this tank was going to be labeled the T-72 BVM. So, more or less a T-72 upgrade. Ah, Russia, you've done it again in feeding us lies about your tank invincibility. So, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate all of the new subs that have come on board. Of course, I hit the 100k just last night or earlier today. And it means a lot because it helps spread the message that these aggressive or expansionist autocracies or dictatorships need to be exposed for their systemically and fundamentally flawed societies. And also to show the untenable nature of wars, especially in this modern day and age. Even if you think that you are the Goliath in a David and Goliath situation or dynamic. So thanks again, guys. Please continue to like and comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!